what? Let's talk a little college football. He's waiting, and it's a big day because it's the college football rankings coming out later today. John Canzano joins us now for his weekly visit, brought to you by Zeke's Pizza. Best selection of pizzas and local Northwest craft beers. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Follow John on Twitter, John Canzano BFT. Read all of his work at JohnCanzano.com. And, of course, the radio show, The Bald-Faced Truth, down in Portland, Oregon, 7:50 The Game. And what you're going to find with John is not some stupid joke today about why it's an important day today. It's real important for America because of the college football rankings coming out at 4:00. Hi, John.
I'm gonna lean into it. Is that okay?
Yeah, lean into it.
All right. So here's the deal. My wife, TV news anchor, and often she found herself anchoring on the weekends opposite the Super Bowl. And I would always ask her, like, what are you going to put on opposite the Super Bowl? And she'd say, well, you counter program. Like, that's why the Puppy Bowl is on opposite the Super Bowl. So we're going to counter program a little bit here. I think it's an opportunity. Let's lean into this decision day, this election day, all the chaos that will ensue. And let's just acknowledge and embrace the idea that we're going to be what sports is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a diversion, damn it. This is supposed to be fun. This is not supposed to feel like a bunch of hand-wringing. It's one of the final frontiers where we can all join together, and we don't have to talk about religion. We don't have to talk about politics. We can talk about sports.
It's the only thing really that brings the masses together.
Yeah. I think it's why it became a battleground, like, in the last decade. Because think about it. There's this algorithm on Facebook, an algorithm on Twitter, an algorithm on Instagram that kind of feeds you what you are into and aligns you. Like, if your mom is leaning one way or the other, all she's hearing is the stuff that agrees with her. Yeah. Sports is a place where everybody's there. Whoever you're sitting by at the stadium, you don't know who that person voted for or where they lean, where their ideology is economically or otherwise. And so I do think it became a battleground for that reason, Puck. I think politics looked over and went, hey, they're all still paying attention there. Let's get in there and try to change some minds.
Let's jump into it. 4:00 today. Where are my Cougs going to be ranked? All right. Where are they going to be when the rankings are announced today, starting at 4:00?
Well, I think it's interesting to look at the committee. I took a deep dive on the committee, and I looked at who's on the committee. Ward Manuel, the Michigan AD, is the chair of the selection committee. There are several ADs, there are several former coaches, but I think one guy in particular that jumps out at me, I'm very interested to hear what his voice is in the room, is Mike Riley, the former Oregon State coach. Here's a guy Riley. He understands Washington State and Oregon State, and he lives in Corvallis. He gets coffee in downtown Corvallis in the morning. And so I'm interested, is Mike Riley going to have an influence in this thing that sort of, has the back of the Pac-2 or the Pac-12 or whatever you want to call them, whether independents. But I think the Cougs are going to be pleasantly surprised. I think Coug fans who, a week ago, everybody was saying 11-1, there's no way you get in. All of a sudden, Texas Tech beats Iowa State. Washington beats USC. Suddenly, you might have a top 25 victory there against Texas Tech by the end of the season. And it looks a little nicer for Washington State. So, look, I am penciling Washington State in around 18 in this initial poll. I think that's about where they're going to be. But let's see what the committee does. They've traditionally rewarded and penalized based on strength of schedule. There's some other teams in front of Washington State that haven't played anybody. Indiana hasn't played anybody. Indiana might get to the end of the season, Puck, and if they lose to Ohio State, Indiana would not have a win over a team that is over 500. They have played everybody. Everybody at the end of the season could be 6-6 or worse that they have defeated. So I'm really curious to see what the committee does. And we're going to get this first set of rankings. But if you're a Washington State fan and you open at 18, don't fret. I still think you have a 5 or 10% chance, puncher's chance, to get in there. A Buster Douglas to get in there and be close and at least be talked about down the stretch.
You want to hear what my sometimes partner? He asked me this hypothetical yesterday.
Okay.
And I almost wanted to just literally jump through the computer and rip his head off. This was Jim Moore yesterday, hypothetical.
The Cougs to make it into the college football playoff at number 12, but that would also mean Washington winning at Penn State and winning at Oregon, or Would you rather have the Huskies lose by 50 at Penn State, lose by 50 in Eugene, and have the Cougs be number 13 and be the first team out?
I'd rather them win and we be the 12th seed.
I'll go for the 50-point losses. I'll take that.
We would be in the college football playoff.
I just hate Washington, okay? I hate them that much. I don't
You're terrible.
I want them to lose by 50, both of them.
You are just, it would help us if they win out.
I know. I'm sorry.
So your hatred for them supersedes.
I almost enjoy Husky.
Your excitement.
I enjoy Husky losses as much as Cougar wins.
You are an idiot.
Jim's like the guy running the 100-meter dash who's looking over at that lane, Just keep your head up and keep running, Jim.
Hey, Cougar fans, you want them to keep winning.
Yeah.
You want them to beat Penn State. You want them to beat Oregon. Now, I don't think either is going to happen. Not a chance, but that's what you want. Yeah. And you want Texas Tech to beat Colorado this weekend. I mean, it makes their win over them in the beginning of the season look better. It's a no-brainer.
You need wins you need quality wins, which are 500 or better teams. So you need Washington to get bowl eligible. So you really just need Washington to get UCLA in that game that they play in between these two tough ones. But I also think you need Texas Tech to be ranked at the end of the year. If Texas Tech is a top 25 team in the final rankings, the committee is going to say, hey, Washington State has a win over a top 25 team. It looks better. So, yes, Washington State had a great week from that perspective. They've got to win out. I think margin of victory, you saw it with the Oregon game, Oregon punching in a late touchdown against Michigan. I think margin of victory and style points matter, and I think the coaches know it. So, maybe keep an eye on that as well if you're Washington State down the stretch. You
think Lanning did that to send a message to the committee or to cover the spread?
I think that they're all cognizant right now that if they get in a situation where they're an at-large team, they are jockeying for position and they're just trying to do everything possible. So I think, there was a decision he has. The ball's on like the 7-yard line. He's got about 1:10 left. You can take a knee and end the thing. Michigan was not calling timeout, but they wanted the points. They wanted the 21-point victory at Michigan. It's going to look good. I mean, it's a 3-touchdown victory at Michigan. And if we've learned anything, look at what happened when Washington State barely beat San Diego State, a couple weekends ago. People weren't watching the game. They only looked at the score, Puck. Mm-hmm. And anybody who watched that game went, ooh, it wasn't a great performance by Washington State. Maybe it was a sandy field. Maybe it was, I don't know what it was. But all the committee saw was a win. And all the the pollsters saw was a win. And so all of a sudden, Washington State's a top 25 team. So keep winning, make it look good on paper, and root for those other teams that you've played.
I just think it would be one of the most incredible. I mean, I think it's still a long shot. We've talked about how I feel it's a long shot. I also think the fan of me, it's fun to talk about. Yeah. I'm gonna revel in it today. All right. And I'm gonna revel in it next week. And because hopefully they don't kick it against Utah State. Because again, it's just fun. They're gonna do the show today at 4:00. And Reese Davis and everyone else that's going to be up there. And at some point, their name's going to pop up. And they're going to have to spend a minute talking about them or so. And they'll bring up, hey, listen, these guys were cast away. And it's everything that the underdog story we all love in sports. We do. We gravitate towards it. And they are the biggest underdog story in college football right now. This was a program that was left to die. And Oregon State left to die. And now they have found themselves, and I have acknowledged this every time. It's like a disclaimer for an ED medication. I understand their record wouldn't be 7-1 if they were playing in the Pac-12. I get it. I know their record is benefited from the people that they have played, but they can only beat those teams that they have played, and they beat 2 Power 5 teams anyway. So, but again, I'm gonna love it. It's going to be fun for them to talk about it for a minute today, and then the next week, and then the following week. And if they don't get in, they don't get in. I had zero expectation they would get in the college football playoffs anyways. But, for Cougar fans, it's like reveling. It's fun. This is what, again, sports should be.
I look back, at sort of the G5 teams that had one loss and what the committee did with them. And Tulane in 2022 was sitting around number 14, entering kind of the in that conference championship week of the season. So look, if you are Washington State and you are talked about and you are relevant, that was the mission this year.
Right.
And so Yeah, if you get in, if you punch your way in, if something happens, some screwy things happen, in front of you as they did last weekend, I think you're going to be right on that bubble. But the mission for Oregon State and Washington State at the beginning of the year was stay relevant, try to hold your rosters together, try to go out and reconstitute the conference. And I think if you're Washington State, you're going check, 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 and you're going to get talked about in the next month.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a Cougar fan, you got to turn your attention. You want Virginia Tech to knock off Clemson this week. Clemson's got 2 losses, all right?
Yeah.
You want Ole Miss is at home against Georgia. You want to root for the Dogs. You want Georgia to knock off Ole Miss. That would give them 3 losses. And you want Texas Tech to beat Colorado and so on and so forth. I mean, it's just there's going to be something to kind of pay attention to every single week. God forbid. I mean, can Florida State pull their head out of their asses and knock off Notre Dame? Probably not. You want LSU. Most likely, you want LSU. You want LSU to beat Alabama at home because if they beat them, then it's done. I mean, Kalen DeBoer's out. He's done. I mean, he's not out, but he's out of the college football playoff. Gonna have 3 losses in the conference. Done.
And look, these things you're mentioning are not long shots. Like you're mentioning some things that could happen. And I've watched Texas Tech since that Washington State game, and that win is starting to look better and better. Washington has not been good away from Husky Stadium, but. Right. I think they're going to get to 6, and that makes that a quality win, and so you need just some of these things to fall in your direction. But I think if Washington State wins out, Puck, I think they're sitting around 13, 14, 15 if they get no help. And so keep an eye on this thing. I think they're going to be talked about until the final ranking, and that is the mission.
Again, and you've been on that all year. All right, what the other doom and gloom for Cougar fans, because we have to do this to ourselves every year, and every time there's a coach with success. I think it's a tradition unlike any other. Sorry, Jim Nantz. We like to cut ourselves, and then we'll be, well, I mean, part of me doesn't want to go 11-1 because if we go 11-1, then we're going to lose our head coach. We can't have nice things, and we have to always focus on like the negative things. It's like last year. I don't know if I want to get in the NCAA tournament because we get in the NCAA tournament, Kyle Smith's going to leave.
Right.
All right. So what? He leaves. They go 11-1, and there'll be openings across college football. His name will come up. He told you. I think you talked to him last week. About hey, I just want to coach again 10 more years, and then I'm going to be done. He's going to be. Suitors are going to come after him, John. I mean, what's the status right now with his contract?
Well, they extended him in 2023, in January of 2023. His contract runs through January 14th of 2028. So it takes you through the 2027 season. Now, in most cases, that's enough time. But if you're Washington State and you're listening, if you're Ann McCoy, the athletic director, she's listening. She heard him on your show say a similar thing, 10 years, this is what I want to do. He comes on my show, he says that. Jake Dickert is signaling in all sorts of ways that what he values is security, and he's 41 years old. He wants to coach till he's 51 because he wants to go watch his kids play high school football. Great. Show him that you're listening to that. And it would be a great proactive move by Washington State to come out and give him either a 10-year deal, extend it to 10 years, or give him the Mike Riley contract that Oregon State gave Riley years ago, where they said, hey, every time you win 6 games, automatic 1-year extension. And so it really did become a lifetime deal for Riley, where, it became like, hey, just be bowl eligible and you're getting additional years. Like you always have security here. And for a guy like Dickert, that might speak his love language. But there's, I am told there's a little bit of apprehension from the administrative side at Washington State. And it's not from the university president. It's not from the athletic director. The apprehension is coming from above the campus. You've got a board of trustees that just had sort of this financial crisis on campus that they have addressed. I think there's a little bit of apprehension from the athletic department and the university to go, hey, we want to extend our football coach 10 years. So it's why I think the Mike Riley approach might be a little more tactful here, where you approach Jake Dickert and you say, look, we want to give you security. We know we can't pay you what a Power 4 job would pay you right now. Somebody could offer him $4 or $5 million, $6 million to go coach in a different conference, but you can offer him something the others can't. You can say to him, look, if you want to coach all the way to your 51, here's how we do it. We just put that rolling extension. You could even say you get 2 years every time you win 6 games, up to 10-year maximum. So all of a sudden, Jake Dickert and his wife are looking around going, look, we have something in Pullman we can get nowhere else. Now, if it just comes down to a sheer, bidding war, and I don't think that's what Dickert's after, you're not going to win that at Washington State because some Power 4 school can come in and pay him more. But that's the approach I would take. I would also pump the brakes a little bit on thinking there's going to be a ton of openings in this offseason. A lot of the athletic directors I'm talking with are saying this is the year to be patient with a coach because they don't know how, one, the playoff expansion is going to affect scheduling and how teams think. Two, you've got this revenue sharing from the House settlement that's coming in. Their world's spinning a little bit. This may not be the time to fire your coach, pay a big buyout, and make a change. This might be the time to stay with a guy for 1 year while you kind of figure out the financial logistics of what's in front of you. But certainly, I would be proactive right now. I am told that Ann McCoy, regular contact with Jake Dickert and his agent. They're all saying that the conversations are going back and forth and they're talking, and that's a good place to be if you're Washington State. But I might ramp that up a little bit if I were Washington State and start talking about, hey, how about a little rolling extension? Could you get that by the trustees who have been, I think, really shell-shocked by the finances of 2 and 3 years ago?
Yeah. He makes around, I think it's around 2.5 million. You're right. There's going to be other programs that could step up and pay him more money. And I'm with you. I think he's, if I were his agent, I would advise him to stop talking about here's how much longer I want to coach. Mm-hmm. And how much I love small towns because you're kind of taking away your negotiating tactic there. It's kind of throwing that out the window. I think Washington State should use that in their favor. And I'm not saying lowball him. I'm just saying to your point, here it is. You want to, he's a small town guy. And I believe him, when he said it to me a few weeks ago or months ago that I want to coach 10 more years. And I'd like it to be here. I believe him. And I'm a guy that doesn't believe any of these guys. I don't, because I've always called them professional liars. Yeah. And to a degree they are. But, there's something about him. I just think he's such a small town guy. He likes it. I think he likes that small town environment. I think he likes where his kids, the whole leave your doors open, kids running around. I think he digs that stuff. And I do believe him that he wants to be done, at 50. Because I think he saw, his dad, and I think he saw others in the profession, not be there for sporting events. And knowing him a little bit, I just don't think he wants that. He doesn't want that style of being a father.
He said that. I mean, I said, what is that about? Because, I've always talked about, I don't want to be the old guy in the press box where people are going, why is he still showing up? Right. You see it in coaching. You see coaches that miss the childhood of their own children because they're coaching other people's children. And so Dickert said that, he was talking about, his kids are playing like flag football or something right now. And he was saying, hey, they're finishing off a championship season. You could tell he was invested in it. Yeah. And he wants to be there. And I said, where does that come from? And he said it was from his own parents. And so I think if you're Ann McCoy, if you're Kirk Schultz, I know Schultz is leaving in another year or whatever. But I think you show Jake Dickert that you're listening. And I think that stuff matters to a coach like Dickert more than others would. I think you show him you're listening and you go to him and you say, look, this isn't the time to give you a 10-year deal, but here's how we can structure it so it ends up being you stay as long as you want. Yeah. Mike Riley had it at Oregon State. It worked for Mike Riley. It worked for Oregon State. But it amounts to saying to him, hey, it's a 10-year, $30 million deal. And nobody else is going to give him that right now. Anybody else that's going to hire him might say, hey, we'll give you $4 or $5 million a year, but we're only giving you 4 years. That's not what he wants to hear. He wants to hear he can be somewhere 10 years. This is the time to have that conversation.
Yeah. I think the only school, and it's obvious to everyone, if Luke Fickell ever leaves, goes someplace else, fired, Wisconsin would be the one. I think he would take it, but he's from there and he grew up there and he grew up being a Badgers fan. So I would totally
put it in the contract. Put it in the contract. Hey, you have a no buyout for Wisconsin. Anything else you have a huge buyout for. And look, this can be negotiated. It's got to be delicate though, because the trustees that saw the budget crisis under Pat Chun and they're not going to want to hear 10-year deal right now. So you got to be tactful about this.
What does Jen Cohen do about Lincoln Riley? He closes practice. It didn't work. They very much had a winnable game against Washington. In fact, they probably should have won that game, but they did not. They've made a quarterback change this week. You've detailed it. It's probably about $88 million that they'll owe him. And you talked about it in your mailbag this week up at johncanzano.com. The first three people you would call, and those first three people would be?
I go right to Chris Peterson, call him. I don't think he'd take the job, but that's Jen Cohen's first call. You talk to Peterson, then you talk to Kalen DeBoer. And, how happy are you at Alabama? Could you duplicate what you're doing at Alabama at USC? I think we've learned that one of the reasons Nick Saban left Alabama was that he probably figured out he wasn't going to have head and shoulders the best players anymore. He wasn't going to have the best team anymore. Kalen DeBoer going through some of that at Alabama. And then the third guy is Jonathan Smith. And so, those are the three phone calls you make. But this is what it comes down to, Puck. Lincoln Riley's a child. Like, you have a child who is a football coach. He's closing practice. He's picking on a reporter. He's saying all the wrong things. If you're Jen Cohen, you had Chris Peterson. That's an adult who's a head football coach. You had Kalen DeBoer. That's an adult who was your football coach. I can't imagine having to deal with Lincoln Riley, not just the losing, but it's the other stuff. But the question is, can the donors at USC afford $88 million? Are they willing to write that check and fix that mistake? Or is she stuck with him 1 to 2 more years? I still think the phone calls are the same, whether it happens now, whether it happens in 2 or 3 years, whether Lincoln Riley goes to the NFL. But, if you're Jen Cohen, you had a couple of real adults running your football program, and now she's got Junior doing it.
Yeah, he's it's not a good fit, and he doesn't carry himself, as a coach should carry him. And it's weird because you hear all these stories. I guess the writing was on the wall, and there was a bunch of Oklahoma fans that were telling USC fans, just wait, you'll get it. And they now are circling back to him saying, we told you so. This is exactly his playbook. He does this. This is what he did at Oklahoma, and now he's doing it at USC.
I remember when he was hired, there was this coronation going on. Everybody was saying, they're going to win the Pac-12 every year. And, he came in, he had success with Caleb Williams in year 1. But, his second year, he goes 5-4 in conference play. Like, they weren't great. And now they're 2-5 and facing, they're losing close games. He is acting immature in the wake of those games. It's a matter of time with him and money. The $88 million might be too much for USC to swallow, but maybe there's a buyout in there. Maybe there's an NFL job that he would jump to, but this is not working. He's getting out recruited in his own backyard by schools like Oregon. He, without Caleb Williams, he looks naked out there.
I think he jumps out because I think the Bears will make a decision. I think the Bears will fire their coaching staff, and I bet you they look at him. And or his agent, happens, whoever his agent is.
If you're Jen Cohen, you get
go.
The private plane out and you fly him to Chicago for the interview. Like, you prep him, brush off his suit, fix his hair for him.
How about you do this? If you're Jen, you fly the president out to L.A. Get out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Get out of the Midwest. Come out to LA. Let me wine and dine you to take our coach off our hands. How about that? That'd be a hell of a spin.
First year salary. We'll pay his salary that first year in Chicago.
We'll buy his home in the suburbs of Chicago. Hey, I'm curious. You got Washington and Penn State. They're on Peacock this weekend on a streaming service. Remember, couldn't stay with Pac-12 because of streaming services. Also, it's going to be in like a movie theaters apparently on IMAX, like charging $21 to go watch it. What have the Big Ten ratings been like this year?
Yeah, they're up. The Big Ten Network in particular is up. And that's important to Washington because they've been on the Big Ten Network several times. The president of the Big Ten Network came out and said, look, they're up 9% over last year. The top rated games are the Washington games. So that Seattle market is really delivering for the Big Ten Network. And so they're largely celebrating that as a win and saying this has been fantastic. And they're crediting, the Seattle market because they haven't had the Ducks as much, even though you have a minimum number of games. Yeah. The Ducks have landed on Fox and CBS because they're winning. and winning at a big level. But this has been a success for the Big Ten. Now, Washington may be looking around, right now going, gosh, it's really tough. You didn't expect to lose at Rutgers. You didn't expect to lose at Iowa. Indiana kicked your teeth in. It hasn't all been roses, as you know, but you're going into a hostile environment, the whiteout Penn State game. It's a really intriguing game, given, the emotional letdown for Penn State after losing to Ohio State. I'm really curious to see how this one goes for James Franklin and Penn State. But, Washington, the goal here is getting to 6. I know it doesn't sound like, getting to a national title game, but if you're Jed Fish, you want to be in that bowl game and you want to be a 500 team in your first year.
Goal is 8, Coug fans. That's the goal.
Yeah, that too.
Okay, that's the goal. Don't be Jim Moore wanting them to lose, because Jim's an idiot. All right, you want them to win so it improves our record. All right, and that's all said of us going 11-1. If we kick a game, then they can kick whatever they want. Then I want them to lose every game.
You want them to get to 6. Just get them to 6, make you look better.
No. Only if we go 11-1.
Right,
that's it.
Well, don't you think Washington State will win out? Come on, like this schedule.
Now
you're
oh, yes.
Have I not been here long enough?
Yes, but you don't understand what it's like being a fan of that school.
Okay.
You can never look ahead. And yes, they'll be favored in every one of those games, double-digit favorites most likely. Maybe not Oregon State, but it's just they're going to be.
You have Johnny Mateer on your side, man. I talked to him for the first time last week.
And pretty good
what
guy,
an impressive guy.
Yeah.
What a really impressive.
A lot of confidence in that kid.
And guess what? He actually is going to class. He was talking about his classes on Mondays and Wednesdays and how difficult they are and how he hasn't been able to do interviews. Because I think at 11-1, if John Mateer is continuing to run the football like he's run, passing like he passes, I don't think he wins the Heisman, but he should be on those lists, Puck, and he should be getting a lot more love than he's getting, because he's the engine driving that thing.
And that serves me a great time to say this. By the way, you can join the Cougar Collective, and just for $18.90, you can help these student athletes collect money. And I would just go there right now, Cougar fans, cougcollective.org, and just say, I want to pay John Mateer. Because you want to talk about schools that will be coming after that kid. And also the one thing I've interviewed him before, with his confidence level, how he looks, probably does well on campus.
Think so?
I think so. I think he does quite well.
He told me he wanted to play 2 sports. And that, Jake Dickert told him he had to do just football only. Now,
he wanted to play baseball?
Yeah, he wanted to play baseball. He was a shortstop on his high school baseball team. He was a pretty good player. And so, look, I think if you're John Mateer, you're going to get offers. Yeah. I think, if you're a Washington State fan, it's why it becomes even more important to give Jake Dickert the security he needs to turn around and sell the message that he sold last offseason. Did a great job retaining that roster. But I would say, for the doom and gloom crowd out there, look, Ashton Genty at Boise State had people come at him too. And I think we're going to see some guys, not all, some guys sort of look around and go, hey, the Ron Stone effect, right? Look around and go, hey, I can continue here. My continuity and momentum here is worth more. But there's a lot of noise out there, and if Texas or Texas A&M or somebody in Mateer's home state comes calling, that's going to be tough.
A&M would be the one. That's they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, the kid that they played last week can't throw the football. That would be the one. Not Texas because of what the situation they have there, but A&M would be the one school that I would be real leery of. Hey, not exact. Well, it's a football story, and I guess in a way it's a college football story because it happened at a college football game. And you talked about, I think, in your mailbag, and what happened to us? What has happened to us as human beings? Where did we lose our decency, our ability to handle ourselves in public and how we interact with people. I mean, there's two incidents that happened, I think, in the last week or so. One's on a professional level, one was not. The Jason Kelce incident at Penn State, where I'm not going to repeat what the kid was saying. It's all over the internet. You know, he's videotaping him, and he wanted to get a rise out of Jason Kelce, and he got it. And Kelce responded, and actually, I think he could have, and was well within his right to even go a step further to hit that kid. Because that kid had, and it's the problem with society now, and it's the problem with social media. There are there's no consequences, John, for this type of behavior anymore, and it's allowed.
Yeah. The loss of civility is a topic, right? Like, what happened to society? Because this stuff wasn't happening 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It wasn't. This has been a progression. Now, I would say we've watched social media sort of compound that, and the idea that, hey, if you got a camera, you can be a troll, hide behind a keyboard, hide behind your phone, slip into somebody's DMs, and just say things you would never say to their face. There's an arm's length feel to that social media platform that sort of creates these trolls. The second one is, we've watched it in politics, we've watched it in business. There's a loss of ethics. There's a loss of civility. There used to be a dignified way that people did business. There used to be a dignified way that people campaigned. For whatever reason, that has stopped being a civil thing. And I think it sets a bad example. And then I think the third thing, and this is the one we all can control, is I think there's some poor parenting going on out there. I can tell you what I would have done if that was Mike holding that phone. The kid would have been in more trouble than Jason Kelce could have given my kid. Like, it was, I was not okay with what happened. And I didn't mind that Kelce whipped around and did something about it to that twerp who was holding the phone, because I just feel like, you're in a disadvantaged position. If you're Kelce, you probably should have had security with him, but he's got a bunch of people around him who are all kind of barbing him and jabbing him, trying to get a rise out of him. And he finally hears something that triggers him, and he turns around and deals with it. I love that he spiked the phone. I love that there was a consequence to that idiot saying what he said. Kelce's apologized, and he says, I didn't want to meet hate with hate. My wife and I disagree on this. She says, you got to stay above it. But I think there's a point where you just, if you're mouthing off to Mike Tyson, there's a point where you might get your butt kicked by Mike Tyson on an airplane or wherever you are, Kelce in the parking lot. I don't like it at all. I think the more we talk about it, the better it is. But I would like to see people return to a place where we have a little civility and a little dignity with each other.
I think that again, and I think for anybody criticizing him for how he handled it, you got to be above it. You've never been in it. You've never been in that situation. And when you involve a loved one, a family member, I mean, it just crosses the line. And that kid is so lucky. In fact, I think Jason Kelce showed restraint.
Got off easy.
Because there's another video that shows, once he picks up the phone and hands it to him, where that kid is still going in on him.
Yeah.
And calls him the B word and is like basically, I'll kick your ass. This kid, if Kelce wanted to murder that kid with his bare hands, he could have. Yeah. And that kid is lucky. He's lucky that he didn't do anything. And then it gets me to the other one, which is, I guess, a more professional one, is the situation in Philadelphia with Joel Embiid. And there's a columnist there, and Marcus Hayes, that wrote a column about Joel Embiid that was critical of him. And I read it, and it was fair in terms of his availability of playing. It's a huge storyline, not only in Philadelphia, it's a huge storyline in the NBA about load management. But the problem was that he brought up the columnist about his son and then his dead brother. And there was no reason for Marcus Hayes to bring it up. It had nothing to do with the article.
Yeah. And I think, look, I've been in that situation where you're trying to make a point and you see the connection. And I've had editors say, hey, look, I don't know, do you want to say that? And it gives you a chance to think about it. So I think there's a breakdown there with the columnist could have made his point without bringing up the deceased brother, Could have made the point without bringing up the Joel Embiid's son. Leave them out of it. What do they have to do with what Joel Embiid is doing now? And if you want to make the point that Embiid, when he had his son, had this real desire to make his kid proud of him, make that point without bringing up the dead brother. Because when you get personal with Embiid, when you start talking about his brother and his family, and the child was named after his deceased brother, I think you're getting too far away from your point. So I think the newspaper, the writer, and the editor had a breakdown there, and it distracts from what would have been a really good piece. And Marcus Hayes is an experienced journalist, didn't need that stuff to make the point. And then Embiid reacts to it, and suddenly the NBA is investigating, and Embiid's the bad guy. I think there are a lot of people that would have reacted the same way. I just think it was unnecessary to bring up the family member. Look, I've been in that situation. I had a column years ago that I wrote about Oregon football coach Mike Bellotti. He had a son who got a DUI on the football team. Wrote about that. Different, right? He's on the team. There's a DUI involved. The Bellotti family got really upset about me mentioning it. And I said, look, if he wasn't on the team, I wouldn't mention it, but he's a member of the football team. You have to know that going in, that you are hitting around sensitive topics. You're poking around nerves when you do that. And it does detract from the larger point, which with Embiid is, why aren't you available? Why are you out of shape? Those are all fair points.
Right.
It's just a sentence or two that you totally detract from the point you're making.
Yeah, it became personal, and I just think that's where he failed. I think when you start mentioning his family, it became personal, and I think Joel Embiid, to me, like Kelce, I thought had the right reaction. I mean, again, you don't want anything to turn physical between a player and a reporter, but you've been in plenty of locker rooms as of high. That stuff is so common, and probably not as much anymore just because of the cell phones and all that. But back before that, it was, there was always confrontations between, reporters and players. But it's I don't know. The way we treat each other is just really odd. And I don't get it. And I'm with you, what you said earlier about if I was the parents of that Penn State kid, I'd be and maybe they are, I'd be so embarrassed.
I'd be so mad.
That's so embarrassed and mad and like, what are you doing? I didn't raise you like this. Don't do that.
You know what the kid's going to say? Let's sue him. And if I'm that dad, I'm like, we don't sue anybody.
We're not going to sue anybody.
Go apologize to Jason Kelce and stop acting like an idiot.
And you know what? I'll be honest with you. Shame on ESPN for forcing an apology. Apology for what? And then to lead off the show with it. I mean, it's one thing if you want to do it. You don't lead off your Monday Night Football countdown show with him having to read some prepared statement that he clearly didn't want to read anyways. It was barely an apology. So whatever. The whole thing was terrible. All right. Yeah. It's a big, big day for America. College football rankings.
Thanks for the Decision Day special.
Yeah. All right. You're the best. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks, John.
Thanks, man.
There he is, John Canzano. Go read his work, johncanzano.com. Also, follow him on Twitter at John Canzano BFT. He does a radio show in Portland, the Bald-Faced True 750 The Game. It's all brought to you by Zeke's Pizza, best selection of pizzas, local Northwest craft beers. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com for the best deals around. John joins us every single Tuesday at around 10:45. In case you missed this episode, everything will be up on YouTube. You can listen to it later on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you find your podcast. All right, let's